Going from 12 teams to 20 teams in the Overwatch League is a massive jump, and it makes it even more hard to decide who is better than who. To be honest guys, my first pick, the Chengdu Hunters, number 20, that one was easy, but as soon as I finished that one, I knew this next pick was going to be almost impossible. We have the Florida Mayhem, Boston Uprising, Washington Justice, and possibly some other teams that could easily slip and be one of the worst teams going into next season. There are so many different factors that play into each team and whether or not they're going to succeed. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to have to pick number 19, and I'm going to go with the Washington Justice, a budget nightmare. Heck, I even exposed their GM for offering other coaches in the league a job at their company, and then after that said coach quit their job to go over to Washington Justice, he was told that there's no spot for him over there. And this at the end of the day was all blamed on budget, which for the most part, when you do look at this roster, it seems like it was built with a low budget. Sure, there might be a couple good pieces here and there, but overall, it's just a roster full of players that never proved themselves. Another major factor on why I'm choosing Washington Justice as number 19 on my power rankings list is because, Jesus Christ, guys, they have the hardest Stage 1 schedule out of every single team. Let me just read it out to you guys. Their first match is against New York Excelsior. Second match is against London Spitfire. Third match is against Philadelphia Fusion. Fourth match is against San Francisco Shock. Fifth match is against Seoul Dynasty. Sixth match is against Paris Eternal. And then finally their seventh match, luckily they have something easy, the Florida Mayhem. But if they can even make it there in one piece, I don't even know if they'll have a chance to win this game. Doesn't even matter how bad Florida Mayhem is. So these are my initial thoughts on why I'm choosing Washington Justice as number 19 in my rankings. Today in this video, we're going to go all the way down their organization, top to bottom, starting off with the management, then the coaches, then the players. I will give you guys my thoughts on every single person, where they come from, and if it's a good addition for this team or if it's a bad addition. So let's jump straight into it and talk about the owner of the Washington Justice. We have Mark Ein. Mark Ein is a wealthy businessman, an entrepreneur, investor, sports team owner, and much, much more. The main thing about Mark Ein is that he seems to be very emotionally invested in this Overwatch League team and is a good, caring owner. Let's go and roll a clip of him talking about esports on NBC.
Esports is professional gaming, and gaming is one of the biggest trends in the world. 2 billion people on the planet play video games, and these are the best players in the world. And esports as an ecosystem is already big, and it's growing faster than any other sports platform.
But this is people who will watch them in stadiums, they will watch them online, they will be able to see this in television in some cases?
All of the above, in huge numbers.
So far, so good, right, guys? Mark Ein, he seems like a good owner. He's got the money. He bought the team. Yeah, not a bad owner. Let's go to move on now to the GM of this Overwatch League team, which is where I believe it gets a little hairy. And we might end up coming back talking about Mark Ein. So now moving on to the general manager of the Washington Justice, we have Kate. Kate definitely has an interesting story in esports. She came all the way from the bottom, working with unsigned Contenders Trials teams. One specifically was mine, which is where she started her career on Kungarna as one of our managers and social media directors. And I really thought she did a great job. She seemed like a caring person, she worked hard, and was always there when we needed her. But she was more of just a social media director rather than an actual manager. And I think that's where the initial issues arise for Washington Justice, and that's that Kate didn't really know what she was doing when she got hired to pretty much build this Overwatch League team. As mentioned earlier, she hired Harsha, the former analyst of San Francisco Shock, and then pulled the rug under him after he quit his job and said that they had budget issues and they can no longer sign him. Really unfortunate for Harsha, but we're not here to talk about him. We're here to talk about Kate and this supposed Washington DC budget. At first when I heard this, I was like, I don't really buy the whole budget thing, but it kind of adds up. So the first moves that Washington Justice made after Kate was signing Wizard and Yanis, the former New York Excelsior player and coach. Of course, it wasn't easy to get them because I personally heard from my trusted sources that Washington DC was in an incredible bidding war with teams like Vancouver, and they had to offer over $150,000 to sign Wizard Young. We're not too sure what the exact price is for Yanis, but we can also assume that that was a pretty penny as well. So after signing these two, Kate had put the Washington Justice in an interesting spot where they couldn't go out and sign any more blockbuster or star players. And that's kind of what happened after they signed Yanis and Wizard Young. They went out and they picked up a lot of players who were unknown, played for mid-tier teams, very similar to what the Boston Uprising did going into Season 1 Overwatch League. So yeah, Kate went out there and did a great job picking up Wizard Young, probably the best coach on the market at the time, and Yanis, one of the best main tanks on the market at the time. But she made this move so early and apparently under a very small budget, leaving them no space to sign any other good players. So this is one of the first major issues with this team. Now moving on, let's go ahead and jump into the coaches. As mentioned, we have Wizard Young, one of the greatest coaches of Overwatch League we've seen so far. At least that's what we think. Wizard Hyung took a lot of credit for New York Excelsior's success during Season 1. He was the typical genius. Everything behind their strategies and comps was all him, right? At least that's what the public thinks. I might disagree a little bit with that. Sure, Wizard Hyung, he did a great job for New York Excelsior. The guy, he is the typical genius. But it wasn't all him. New York Excelsior had a pretty good coaching staff behind them, not just Wizard Hyung. I don't want to downplay Wizard Hyung's coaching abilities, but he wasn't even the head coach of New York Excelsior in Season 1. Pavane was, who also was the head coach of the South Korean World Cup roster, who was very, very successful too. Wizard Hyung was working under Pavane. That's my main point. He wasn't the mastermind. I'm sure he had a huge part of their success during Season 1, but he also had a huge part in their demise during the playoffs. I'm sure we all remember that typical genius clip that played right before the Philadelphia Fusion and New York Excelsior's playoff match, where Wizard Hyung just talked on and on and on about for at least 2 minutes on why he is such an incredible, typical genius coach and how they were going to smash everybody. And then they went on to that match against Philadelphia Fusion and they played outdated comps, they looked unprepared, their strategy wasn't there, and New York Excelsior, they were knocked out in their first playoff match. I'm definitely not putting all of the blame on Wizard Hyung, but he does have to take some of it. And moving into this team, he's in an interesting position where he is either going to prove that he is the typical genius or prove that he's just an average coach. It's yet to be seen, but I am not on the Wizard Hyung hype train just yet. Let's move on from Wizard Hyung, though, because we do have a ton of staff members to go through for the Washington Justice. For having such a supposedly low budget, they have so many damn coaches. So their head coach is Wizard Hyung. Their assistant coach is Avala. And she has a decent amount of experience. She's 24 years old, and she was a former coach for Optic Gaming during Season 1 of North American Contenders, where they placed 3rd through 4th. A decent run, so being a coach in a team that did that well, I can see how she would be decent. She's also Korean, so I could see her clicking with Wizard Hyung. Moving on to their third coach / analyst, we have KINGmykL, who actually has a decent amount of coaching experience. He's been part of the committee of Denmark, he's coached Luminosity Gaming, he's coached multiple European teams, Optic Academy, Last Night's Leftovers, a team in Southeast Asia. He's been all over and coached a ton and been an analyst for many teams. So he's got a lot of experience and I think he could definitely help this team. Moving on to their fourth coach, we have a guy named Aaron Heckman, and honestly I have no idea who this guy is. There's nothing about him on Wikipedia. I can't find him on Twitter, so they just have some unknown coach. Apparently he's from the USA. Moving on to the next guy, we have Obasil. It's pretty interesting to see here. I can assume that he's probably here because he worked on Last Night's Leftovers with Kate as a coach. That's his only notable position, and he was only there for 1 season. Could be a good addition, but yet not to be seen. And then moving on to the very last coach, we have Shrugger, who is a guy that I have not heard of for so long. He used to compete on Spliced. Funny thing is, I actually took his spot off that team, and that was practically 2 years ago. And then all of a sudden he reappeared as a coach for the Washington Justice. So interesting pickup there. I mean, you know, it's always great to have a lot of coaches, but at a certain point they might have too many and there could be a lot of headbutting between the staff, especially considering that, you know, Wizard Hyung seems to be pretty strict. And looking at a team like Boston Uprising, very similar to Washington DC going into Season 2, they had a lot of coaches in Season 1 and there was a lot of headbutting there too. So we could see some drama between these people. So overall, this coaching staff is very interesting. I believe it is hit or miss, and here comes the memes in the comments, but it really is. They could either be a 7 or they could be a 2. It just really depends on how well all these guys can work around Wizard Hyung, because I'm sure he's going to be barking orders and telling everybody what to do. If it works out, it works out. But I don't know. I just don't see it coming together for them. There's too many people, and I feel like some will be released mid-season, and there's going to be drama for sure. So overall, I'm going to have to give them a 4 out of 10 on the coaching staff. So overall, I'm going to be a little optimistic and give them a 5 out of 10 on the coaching staff, just because they do have Wizard Hyung. I know he's a smart guy, but it's a little low because I don't see all these people coming together and working perfectly with him. There will be drama. Mark my words. So that's the whole staff. Let's go ahead and move on now and talk about the players. We'll start off with the DPSs. We first have Corey, who comes from the LA Gladiators Legion. There's been a lot of hype around this guy, specifically on my talk show by a lot of the Overwatch League guys. In the past 3 weeks, we've had Avast, Dante, Baby Bay, Manitin, and Super all say that Corey is going to be one of the best Western DPSs in the entire league. There's a lot of hype behind him. It seems like he's popping off in scrims, but that doesn't always mean he's going to be a great player once he gets on the stage. He's definitely definitely inexperienced, and when he goes up against all these strong teams in stage 1, he's going to have a lot of learning and a very hard time. I mean, seriously, we are talking about the best DPSs in the league. He has to go up against New York Excelsior's DPS, London Spitfires, Philadelphia's, Seoul Dynasties, like the Fledas, Birderings, Profits, Surefour, Decay. Like, it's no joke the competition Corey is going to face in this first stage is going to be incredible. And I can't see him performing at a high level or even that great of a level. He will do maybe okay, but more than likely he's going to have a very tough first stage, similar to Dante last season, and Dante did not have to go up against this type of competition. Maybe by the end of the season, he could be one of the best Western DPSs, but it's going to be too late once he gets there. I feel like Washington, D.C. is going to lose almost every single game in the first stage. Second stage is going to be hard as well, and he's not going to have an easy time, especially if he gets frustrated. Moving on to the next player, we have Stratus, another North American DPS player that comes from the Overwatch Contenders team NRG, who had some decent runs in Contenders Season 2 and Season 3. He plays a decent amount of projectile, but also can play that Tracer and a little bit of hit scan. I see him overall being the sub DPS player on this roster. There's not too much to say about him other than that he's extremely young, just like Corey, but I'm a little worried about him because I don't think he's going to get much playtime and his team is going to get rolled over in the first stage. If he gets thrown in, it's going to be into the Wolves and it will be tough for him. Moving on to the third DPS player for this roster, we have Addo, the former Shanghai Dragons DPS player from Season 1. So we do have someone with a little bit of experience, but no experience of winning. I do think that Addo's a great player though. I saw a lot of potential in him during Season 1. He was very flexible, his Tracer was really good at times, and his Genji was really good at times. It was kind of inconsistent though, because it seemed like, oh, he's popping off on Genji right now, but his Tracer sucks. But then another day it was like, oh, he's popping off on Tracer, but his Genji sucks right now. Of course, we could probably attribute that to him being on the Shanghai Dragons, where he didn't win a single game all season long, but the potential was there, and I do feel like he could possibly be the saving grace of this team if he pops off all season long. But that's going to be incredibly hard, especially considering the inexperience of his DPS partners and how hard of competition he has to face early on will hurt them, and that Addo's inexperience in winning will also hurt him. Overall rating the DPS for the Washington Justice, I'm going to give them a 4.5. Once again, just like their coaching staff, there is potential, but it's going to be very hard to reach for these guys. Moving on to the off-tank player for Washington Justice, we have Sansam, who is also the only off-tank on this roster. He doesn't have a very successful history. He has competed a lot in the highest level of contenders in Korea and also Apex, but he's gotten last place every single season. Most recently, he just competed in the open division of Season 3 for Korea. And his team Meta Athena didn't even qualify for contenders trials for Season 3. And then prior to that, his team didn't even make it into Season 2, they failed in trials there. And then in Season 1 of Overwatch Contenders Korea, he got dead last place. Then prior to that, he competed on Metabellum in Apex Season 4, got dead last there. So just overall, he's never ever tasted victory, not even close to being like middle of the pack, which kind of goes with a lot of the players we've seen so far on this roster. Addo with the Shanghai Dragons, he never won. Sure, Stratus and Corey, they did decent North American contenders, but really they never reached the top. They were middle of the pack, and prior to being middle of the pack, they were just at the bottom of the barrel in NA. Corey spent most of his career competing on the worst teams in Tier 3 of North America. Stratus as well competed in multiple open divisions before he made it onto NRG. Just overall, a huge lack of experience when it comes to winning so far for these players, and I think that's really going to hurt them. Sansam is a hard guy to rate because he was always on a team that lost. And especially when you're looking at a guy who played Diva on all these teams, it's almost impossible to tell his level of performance. If he's not eating gravitons left and right, it's like, I don't know. So the fact that he's never gotten signed to a really good team and he's always struggled, I'm going to have to say Sansam isn't going to be that great of an off-tank compared to most of the guys going into Season 2. And I'm going to have to rate him overall a 4.5 out of 10. Now moving on, we can talk about an actual good player on this roster. We have the main tank Yanis coming over from New York Excelsior. Now Yanis had an interesting Season 1. He didn't play the entire thing, but he played about 35% of the games for New York Excelsior, and when he played, he usually won. Now we could easily credit this due to New York Excelsior's players just being so damn good, and it didn't matter whether Yanis or Mano was in there, they were still going to win usually. Which is a fair statement, but you can't deny that Yanis still played great for them. He didn't make a lot of mistakes, and it seemed like he could pick up the play playstyle that Mano couldn't, whether that was playing aggressive or passive at the time. And I do think this is a really good addition to this roster, especially considering the fact that he and Wizard Hyung both worked together on New York Excelsior and wanted to come over here together because they liked each other that much. And he's going to be a big factor on whether or not this team succeeds, but that's going to be really hard on the role he plays. Main tank isn't a role where you can just absolutely carry your team. Yes, you do have a big impact, but also main tanks are the most targeted players in the entire league. One saving grace is that if Goats does stay in meta, the right heart position in Goats is very capable of carrying due to being able to shot call and just lead your team and making the big plays with your shatter and keeping your shield up at the right times. Other than that though, if we move into any other meta, main tank doesn't have that much of an impact overall. Sure, if you have a bad main tank, your team's gonna suck probably because everybody targets main tanks. If Yanis is the main guy on this team that's performing all the time, other teams are just going to target him 24/7 and make it tough. So then he will definitely not be able to carry it, and then this team will fold because of their inexperience and just the competition they're facing in stage 1 I cannot stress enough about. But overall, rating Yanis, I'm gonna give him a 7 out of 10. I think he's a solid main tank. He could be one of the best in the league, but because he is the strongest player on his team, he is going to be held back and is going to get focused super hard, especially in stage 1 by these really strong teams. Moving on to the last role of this team, we have their supports. Starting off with Fozix, who comes from NRG eSports, a North American contenders team where he played with Stratus. Fozix has had a pretty decent career in North America, not the best, but also not the worst. He has some decent placements with NRG, and then previously he did pretty good with Envision eSports. Overall, he's always been a solid main support in North America. I have some personal experience competing against him. He's a good shot caller. The only problem is that the other main support on this team is Korean, and well, most of the players on this team who end up playing on the starting roster are going to be Korean, so I just don't see Fozix being able to be the shot caller or getting much playtime over the other guy. So for that reason, I just don't see Fozix being useful on this roster, and I'm going to have to rate him overall a 4 out of 10. It's not because I don't think he isn't good, it's because I don't think they're going to use him. I really do see him playing the same exact role that Snow and Avast played on the Boston Uprising during Season 1, where they just didn't even have a chance to start. I see Wizard Hyung favoring the Korean players on this team, and unfortunately for Fozix, it just sucks. That's what I see happening. Let's move on to the second main support of this roster. We have Hainu, who I do believe will get most of the starting time because he is Korean. Hainu's a decent main support. He did have a really good run in Overwatch Contenders Korea Season 1, where he got 4th place with Metabellum. Other than that though, his career looks a lot like Sansam's, where he's been just placing dead last in almost every season of Apex and Korean Contenders that he played in, besides that first season. The main thing is though, he does have that experience. He can compete at a decent level, and that's why I believe he is going to start over Fozix completely the entire season. It is tough to rate him though because he does play that main support role. Just like Sansam, it's hard to tell if he is playing good because most of the teams he's been on have lost a lot. So overall, I'm going to have to give him a 5 out of 10. And now that leads us to the very last player of this roster. We have Guido, who's an interesting one. He comes from Seoul Dynasty as a backup flex support in Season 1. He did end up getting some playtime over Ryu Jahong during Season 1, which was a little surprising, but he wasn't a bad player. He played decently, and I do feel like the overall amount of experience he has will help this team. I can see him being a good fit. Overall, the trio of Yanis, Ado, and Guido could be great. That might be the saving grace of this roster, but at the end of the day, with one of the first things I started off, which is the schedule for these guys during Stage 1, I don't see them winning any game, and I think their season will snowball out of control with drama, and I really don't think it matters how good Guido is going to perform. He's not going to be Jonak, but he's also not going to be awful. Overall, I'm going to have to rate Guido a 6 out of 10. So looking at the overall ratings, we gave the coaches a 4, the DPS a 4.5, off-tank 4.5, main tank 7, main supports 5, and flex support a 6, which overall rounds out to a 5.15. And that's it overall. I know this is a long video, guys, but I wanted to go into the Washington Justice in depth on why I think they're going to be ranked number 19 going into the next season. As I said at the beginning, this was a really hard choice. There's other teams out there that could very well be number 19 or even 20, but these are my rankings. Let me know down below in the comments if you guys like them. If you disagree with them, that's fine as well. Also, we're bringing in Linkser and Harry Hook for the talk show this Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. If you guys want to come hang out and talk about anything Overwatch League with them, be sure to tune in. Link to the talk show is down below. That's going to be it for me though, guys. Thank you for watching. I'm out of here. Peace.